You see any items you want to talk about?
I think for me, just number 3, just to have a really quick overview would be helpful.
Sure. Jason, want to pop up about that? This is tied to the modular buildings. These are some of the things that our IT thinks we need to add. And it's some routers and some hotspot type things. About $75,000, $80,000 worth, right?
Some network switches and Wi-Fi access points and the equipment to make those work. We don't have these items now. We have 2 small switches for both sets of portables. We're estimating needing a lot of things to be able to plug in these new modular buildings. And so this is a set of 3 switches per building and 1 wireless access point per classroom. Both of these have long lead times, so we're just trying to get them ordered sooner so we can have them in.
And then do we have adequate cabling to the actual portable site to accommodate this, or is this part of the scope?
This is not part of this. We're still discussing that in our weekly meetings with Brody.
Yeah, I think they have 6 lines per room they're running. Is that what it is? Is it 2 on each wall?
Were you talking cabling in the classrooms, or are you talking
to the
in the
classroom?
In the classrooms, that's still in discussions. But yes, it would be. We're trying to figure out how many connections we need on each wall. You'd have that wireless access point.
But does any of that affect what you're proposing here?
Yes. Once we can determine how many things we're going to have plugged in, we might be able to reduce the number of switches and spend a little less. This is kind of a worst-case scenario for these. But based on what's been discussed so far, this is the minimum. It might be reduced.
This is the maximum.
The way it's laid out right now, this would cover everything. If we remove things, then we could.
So it all be housed in the portable building?
We would have hopefully a network closet in each building.
Okay.
Still waiting to see drawings.
The drawings, I think, come out Monday.
Okay, and then, so when you say a network closet, why do we need so much physical infrastructure in the actual classrooms to accommodate this?
Each classroom could have up to 12 connections.
Okay.
So, and each switch is 48 ports. We've also got cameras. We've got wireless access points. We've got printers, smartboards.
That's all in
Apple
this
TVs.
proposal.
These are the network switches
Okay.
and the wireless access points to plug
Network
things
switches and wireless access points.
This is to plug things into that need network access and for the wireless access.
Okay.
This does not take into account any cabling, any additional smartboards, any additional hardware. This is just network switches and wireless access points.
Okay. Okay. And you feel this is compatible with what is being proposed from communicating with Brody? Feel comfortable that this is what's required?
Yes, at this point, these are the network switches we have deployed in the rest of the campus, and these are the access points. They're the newer version of the access points we have deployed across campus.
Okay, and when do you plan to actually make the purchase?
As soon as possible. If it's approved tonight, I'll submit a purchase order tomorrow.
Okay, and then you said this might be a worst-case scenario. Do you return those things you don't need, or?
So based on the delivery times right now, I would have the opportunity to submit a change order, basically, and say we only need possibly 2 switches instead of 3 per modular.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, we can return.
All right. Any other questions? Kim? Anna?
Nope, not for me.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Consent's approved. All right, let's do a public hearing on H1, Ordinance 964. Conduct a public hearing and consider adopting Ordinance 964, approving a zoning change request from O Park District to Plan Development District Number 8, PD8, including concept plan to allow for a hotel to be located in the portion of Lot 1 CM Group, number 1510 edition that is located within town of Westlake. The subject property is located at 3300 TW King Road, the northwest corner of TW King Road and State Highway 114, and take action.
Briefly, Council, the applicant has requested this item be tabled again to April the 24th. They're still working out some logistical details on their end because some of this property is in the town of Trophy Club, and they're working with Trophy Club while also working with us. So they've respectfully requested that you table it to the 24th of April. So sure. I would recommend if you do that, go ahead and continue the public hearing again to that date so we can still have the public hearing on the 24th without having to renotice.
Sure. So you want to move it to the 23rd of April?
24th.
24th, sorry. All right, we'll move it to the 24th of April. And then you're requesting that we conduct a public hearing today, or to move it
or just continue the public hearing to April 24th and
so
then just table the item.
Continuance, okay. All right, so we'll do a continuance to 24th of April. We can move on to H2. You're also on H2?
Yes, yeah, you need to vote to table.
Okay. Can I get a motion to table ordinance 964?
I'll make a motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Tabled. The 24th of April. All right. H2, ordinance 967, conduct a public hearing considering adopting ordinance 967, approving proposed amendments to ordinance 693, approving the zoning and concept plan for PD 1-3 zoning district Granada to construct a guardhouse, the main entry gate, and take appropriate action. All right, Ron.
So this item just is a request by Granada to add a manned guard gate to their main entrance off Granada Trail. It's a very simple request. It's a PD zoning, though, and because the PD zoning is very specific and the original concept plan didn't show a guardhouse, they just have to come through and amend the ordinance to allow for this guardhouse. The guardhouse itself is going to be about 300 square feet. It'll be located right in front of the existing gate. It'll actually have one arm that would come up or down and let people through, and they could turn around or continue through the main gate, the existing gate, to go into the development. The guardhouse itself has been reviewed by the Granada Architectural Control Committee and been approved. It's also been reviewed by DRC, and it's met all of the town requirements and the Granada's architectural requirements. So we're recommending approval subject to the conditions that are in the ordinance that you have. And there are representatives here tonight that are also here to answer any questions and do a presentation as well.
You guys want? I don't need a presentation.
No, it looks great.
It looks great.
No, I read through it. It looks fine to me.
All right, let's open up to a public hearing. Anyone want to say anything? Close it to a public hearing. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thanks. All right. Move on to regular items. Go on to Westlake Academy Resolution 23-08. Consider approving Westlake Academy Resolution 2308, amending proof of residency policy for Westlake Academy.
So good evening again. Today we're here to talk about the admissions policy at Westlake Academy, making the amendments to the academy so that it reflects our current actions as an organization. As of today, there are some items that are new to the policy that we want to add light to, but also it was for the purpose of clarifying some areas where there was some ambiguity, as well as some areas that needed to be beefed up to ensure that we are doing what we say that we're doing as an academy. The policy for the admissions is to, again, ensure that we at the academy understand when someone is required to provide documentation for gaining admissions to the academy based on primary residence. and also to ensure that that time frame that's in there is one that sort of mirrors the amount of time or estimated time that it takes to build a home within the town of Westlake. Additionally, it was to ensure that we were able to get the documentations that we needed from prospective clients or prospective residents as they're going through the enrollment process at the academy. So overall, the admissions policy added some or beefed up what are the things that we're looking for from prospective residents so that when their child is being enrolled in the academy, we would know which documents we would have, and then also we would have an understanding of what they were, where they were in the process of building their homes. So at this time, do we have any questions regarding the admissions policy that's being proposed?
Yeah, no, thanks very much for bringing this back. It does read a lot better. It's more clear than the last one. I did have a couple of questions. When you ask for evidence of either purchasing an existing home or with new construction, it says that there's a requirement of residency within the secondary boundary at that time. I was just curious, why is that?
So if I understand, the reason is that we would want to ensure that the family was actually within the proper boundaries that the charter allows us to actually enroll students from. So if they were outside of that boundary, then we would not receive the allocated funding for that.
Have we ever had any issues with that, per se?
Not during my tenure. I'm sorry. No. No, I'm not sure that we have had any issues along those lines, but I would assume...
You never know.
The purpose of this is to ensure that
There you go.
stay...
We have?
We have. Okay, there we go. Yes.
Everybody says yes. I guess we need it.
Yes.
On the new construction, I mean, it says here that construction must occur within 2 years. Well, it's an estimated completion date of within 2 years. But it then goes on to say that the applicant will be required to submit verification according to a schedule identified by the town of the completion of major construction milestones. How do we know how that works?
So if I may defer to Darcy on the actual process that it goes through, because that's a real specific one. I know there were some changes or some leniency that was granted during COVID due to supply chain issues, but I'm not sure what happened in the years prior. So.
Before COVID, our residents were required to complete the house, the construction of the house, and move in within the year of school that they were enrolling their students. During COVID, because of the supply demand, houses weren't completed within that year, so there were extensions allowed. You couldn't build a home in Westlake within. It became lean. Allowing hasn't ever been put into our policy before for 2 years, because I'll tell you that allows non-residents, they're not living in Westlake yet, so they're non-residents, to jump ahead lottery applicants. So there's some question how we want to. On that. So that is up for you guys to decide how you want to.
Well, if it's an enforceability issue or a contestable issue, I'm not sure how we can resolve this. But from a layman's perspective, if all it requires is that the builder estimates that they can complete within 2 years and is subject to some agreed milestone identified by the town, to me this is quite a vague policy, and I can see where there could be potential for abuse or someone applying on the lottery feeling this was not fair because, somebody has been using the system. So I'm not sure if this element of it is particularly clear.
One milestone we've used in the past is that the slab of the foundation has to be by the 1st of August or the first day of school. We have had worked with Pat in the office here to verify that that slab has been poured. I do check with him. He gives me an update on that. I'll check in with him if I have questions. Has there been movement on it? Has he seen I don't know, but has he seen electric going in? Has he seen walls going up? I work closely with him, especially at the beginning. Everybody's scrambling to get the foundation poured. Construction terminology, but moving forward, and he gives me an update. I start checking with him around May, April, when residents are moving in. He does go out and check. There have been some people that, up to the day of school, trying to get in. But I go by his guidelines. They do have to have the slab poured.
So we don't have that guidelines documented anywhere?
I don't have documentation. I go based on what Pat tells me.
Because, I feel like this policy's moved over the years, and I think when we first came here, it was a requirement to just own land.
It's never been as far as when I've been doing it, back when school opened until I came back, it's never been.
Okay.
Always been. There had to be
an active builder's permit.
And back in 2003, I was dealing with that at the same time, and we did have a policy that you did have slab poured, you did have progression on it.
But we don't have that as policy now.
It is. We do say that you have to have, as of August 1st.
That the foundation was poured prior to August 1st
has to be poured as of August 1st.
Okay, so once the foundation is poured, that's the year they're eligible to start. And then they have 2 years from that point
and
to
then
complete.
2 years, but they have to show progression.
But that progression is not documented.
It's not documented as to what those exact steps are.
Would it be difficult to have a standardized schedule of progression?
I guess that I would have to ask Pat on what that is, because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know enough about the construction.
Okay, I
You
mean,
have to say,
from my perspective,
walls have to be up within 2 months,
Yeah.
or sorry, I can't answer.
yeah.
Darcy, I'm curious, how well has this process worked for you over the years, and if you've had any enforceability examples or instances with issues?
I would say all Ventrada.
Well, flat out.
It can be a bit stressful at the beginning of the year when we have residents moving in at the last minute trying to deadline. We don't have staff on the school side to go out and enforce and check. We've always had to rely on the town side to say, is this resident ready to move in, or are they moving forward? So without that enforcement side, we just have to take the paperwork, check with the town. So there's really not a.
Okay.
We do, as I'm sitting here listening, do we think we have a lot of risk at this? This pouring the foundation makes sense. You can get in that year. After that, what are we trying to solve for? What is the risk here?
Well, the risk basically is making sure that someone's not coming in, start and not finishing their home, and still taking the place of someone who's on the wait list trying to get in, taking the place of someone who's jumping in line,
Right.
taking the place of someone on the lottery wait list.
But I guess I just ask, what is the percent of time that would happen in Westlake?
not
Someone
often.
pours a foundation, are we trying to put more effort in this?
We have had in the history, we've had some people that have taken advantage of us not being able to enforce it or not having staff to go out and enforce
Right.
it. It's happened on occasion. It's not a lot. One or two here or there. But you had a question earlier, why do we require utility bill and driver's license?
I did not.
Or somebody asked about why do we require that from our secondary boundaries.
Yeah, my question was, why do they have to live in secondary
Okay.
boundary?
Yeah, and that's because of the funding issue. But part of that is we require that of our primary residents too, because that's also a way for us to check to see are they getting water bills.
Do that every year.
Utility bill.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think so. You're asking whether we want to approve this policy. I feel like it's the step in the right direction. There's no downside because we can tomorrow, right? So, and the question, I guess, back to you is: do you feel like so? From my perspective, I find that quite vague and subject to potential abuse. It's a low risk item for you. Do you feel comfortable with the enforcement, the way it's drafted? Would you want this wording tightened up if we approve this, but it came back with some performance schedule or something that was a
I mean, I can think of examples of like where if you poured a slab, say Marantha Court, slabs been poured for a long time. It's not in Westlake, but it's right on our border. Or there's a project over by Stagecoach where they poured slab years ago, and it's been like 4 or 5 years. And so we're starting a wave of new developments coming in.
But I would say you would catch that in your water bills and utility bills and stuff like that on the renewal. That's your secondary control.
Right. It would be great if there was a time frame. I will tell you, no one at the school has time to follow that up and go out and check. So, if there's a way to enforce that,
Right.
that's great. But we don't have the people to go out and check that and verify, and we don't have the staff that knows how to do that, knowledge over the check.
But you work with
Construction
the
timer.
town for that anyways,
Right.
from what it sounds like. The question just is whether we want a more clear-cut, standardized schedule of performance as opposed to the way it's currently drafted. That's really my question. So you have slab poured, 2 years start. Do you want to see it framed by a certain date? Ron, this might be a better question to you. You understand house
I'm
building?
saying that may have to come from the
We don't,
town.
and to your point, I don't want to belabor it either if it's a low risk item because it is only a 2-year window of abuse, and if they're not complete, then
Or can you put a fine? Put some.
So we track all the progress of permits and through the software we have, which is goes through all the different inspection points. So after the slab gets poured, we'll do a framing inspection and we'll start to inspect the home as it nears completion. So there's some digital tracking of that, and of course, we communicate. She mentioned Pat, all over and just let them know how things are going. Some of these custom builds, there's always curveballs that are thrown. Maybe the client wants to change the design midstream. The contractor comes or goes. There's on some of these homes, especially the larger, more complex ones, it may take a long time just because of all the different changes and things like that in the construction. So, I would say on a case-by-case basis, it's something we might want to look at. But in terms of just standard inspection checkpoints, we've got those that we do through our software and through our process and procedure. And also, if a project is abandoned, those permits automatically expire after 6 months. So if a project does get abandoned, let's say a slab gets poured and it goes away, that is something where we would require, if there's not another contractor that comes in or the site has just been completely abandoned, they've got to bust up the slab and return the property back to its original condition.
Isn't that the test right there? Isn't that the answer?
Yeah,
You could give her
our
that
own
information?
policies kind of catch that.
Yeah.
In terms of just making sure nothing stops.
And the check on that too would be the following year.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have the water bill.
Water bill, that's-
or their
yeah, I think you got-
driver's license, so we would catch them the following year. Generally, policy is someone leaves Westlake, their children get to stay for the remainder.
Would this be like legally contestable, possibly? Okay.
But is that just a drafting exercise? Could we tighten up the language? Right.
I think we can prove it for now, and then we can clean it up.
I agree.
We put a little more effort in and clean up the little paragraph on this.
Yeah.
And then I think that's a good idea. Stan, what do you think? I agree. All right. Okay, a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Do this second.
Yeah, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks. All right. Move on to Westlake Resolution 2309, concerning approving Westlake Academy Resolution 2309, amending the mission policy 1-02 at Westlake Academy.
Okay. So the admissions policy is, again, here for you to approve or to consider approving. The purpose of the admission policy is to ensure that lottery applicants for enrollment at the academy are accepted in the timeline that's been presented. Next would be the purpose of re-enrollment and what we're doing in that process to ensure that students are into the academy in the subsequent school year. Then there's the language about the primary and secondary boundaries and how those students are make application to the academy. And the purpose of the revision of this policy was specifically behind how soon we began the process of offering seats to our prospective students in the academy. Currently, we wait till August 1st to begin the process of offering seats to lottery applicants, which is beyond the point of, as you can understand, that sort of scramble that happens at the beginning of the year. What we are intending to do is move that process up by about 4 months so that we begin the process in April, so that over the summer, as changes are happening, it's one-offs as opposed to trying to get 100 or so students into the academy at the beginning of every school year. So the intent of this is really about streamlining the process in terms of when we make offers to families, but also continuing to follow the process that we currently have in place in terms of applications opening at a certain time and closing at a time, and also continuing the process of using the
And so, Dr. Wilson, I was, and I could be dead wrong here, I was under the assumption we kind of waited the last second because we were wondering who was coming back, how many seats we had to fill. Do you feel comfortable, like, that we have those projections in pretty good shape that you can offer this earlier now?
Correct, because in the process, it does state that we do intend to returns, and those are happening actually early in the spring semester or just after we return from winter break. So we know an estimate of who's returning in the next.
And they're accurate, so you feel good.
Well, I will say that we have an intent to return, and as I spoke about earlier, there are about, I think it's on average, about 50 students that leave the academy every summer. So folks will say, yes, I'm returning, but then somewhere between the summer months, they will exit the academy, which then leads us to filling the open spaces plus those spaces that would have been provided for. So how do we make this, one, a better process in terms of how do we provide customer service to our current families, and then also the service that we're providing to prospective.
That's very helpful to know. I did not know that 50 of the intent to returns never actually returned. You know, just for the sake of conversation, the other reason why we waited till August, I think, historically, was because we wanted to make sure that anybody moving to Westlake, you know, and kind of landing in August and walking up would have space. What are your thoughts on that?
That had a slab poured.
Yeah, or bought a home that was already built, right?
So I think that's a great question, because historically we've had very few seats or classes overfilled because of residents moving into Westlake. So I think what we've been sort of waiting for is the thing that has never really happened.
Yeah.
And I think, and I may be wrong a little bit on that, but
I already have every year around January, February, contacted, and Shelley gets contacted by incoming Westlake residents. I already have a list of about 540 residents who contacted us
Excellent.
about coming in and have their students, and they contact me on a regular basis. Time yet, so we keep running.
Right.
By August, that'll probably be up around. But I have their names, so they will be part of the.
It sounds like they're really good at communicating with you.
Yes, they do. They reach out right away. So we will consider them in the early on enrollment process.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions. On the first page, it talks about the re-enrollment process, and it says that one of them is where currently enrolled student who obtained admission as the child of a full-time Town of Westlake employee retains the right to re-enrollment only if the student parent continues to be employed. So given this is a re-enrollment issue, I assume if a person is no longer employed, the child can complete this school year but just cannot re-enroll. Is that
That is
correct?
correct.
'Cause I know there's been some ambiguity on that point. You also mentioned the dreaded Westlake resident lottery in the policy. I assume that would just follow the same standard format that the secondary boundary lottery, same thing. Okay.
How close are we?
If we had one, let's make that clear.
Right, so if we had one, so how close are we? So it's 60 students, so assume all 60 of those students were going into kindergarten, then we would have a true issue going into this coming school year for those students going into kindergarten, because right now we're only filling about anywhere between 48 and 54 seats in kindergarten each school year. So a lottery would have to be run in order for us to determine who actually gets those seats.
Is on the secondary boundary applicants, it says they're randomly drawn through an annual lottery. I assume that's randomized every year, and so if you're on the lottery for 2 or 3 years, that does not give you priority. This addition of the order of offer of enrollment, where you're showing the priorities, is fantastic. Like, it's so much clearer than prior policies, so I thought that was great. I think my last question is, towards the end it says, upon an offer of enrollment, students must provide records demonstrating they have met standards for entry into the grade for which they have applied, and yet we cannot show bias, right? So how does that work? What does that mean?
So if you're applying for 6th grade or better, so if you're applying for 9th grade, there are some 9th grade requirements that you have to have had in order to be considered a 9th grader. If you did not fulfill all of those requirements, the academy has the discretion to disenroll that student, and because they did not fulfill the requirements for 9th.
But you're not talking about an academic requirement.
Carnegie credits earned during that period of time, or completion of the 8th grade. They could have failed the 8th grade and apply for 9th grade at Westlake Academy.
You're checking that through transcripts? Get you in? Okay.
So when we say we cannot discriminate based on academics, I mean, we can still, that's still an acceptable procedure?
Yes, I think that it is not necessarily considered discriminatory. So I think when
Okay.
what we're talking about in terms of discriminating based on academics is that if you are in the second percentile in your class, or you're in the 98th percentile of your class, we're not going to say yes to you but no to the other.
Right, okay.
Any other questions? Nope. All right. Can a motion to approve? And first?
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on next to Resolution 2321, considering approving Resolution 2321, authorizing the mayor, me, to attend to amend
Clarification.
the agreement between the Town of Westlake and Steele and Freeman for the guaranteed maximum price of $1,087,968 to $1,236,844 to make improvements to the downstairs public bathrooms in the gym building, and authorize town staff to make changes not to exceed $25,000 for this project. Oliver, come on down.
Council, Mayor. So this is current bathrooms downstairs at the school. As you can see, they're pretty outdated, especially if we're going to improve the school and all the new renovations. It doesn't make sense to have a downstairs bathroom that's very clearly outdated. So this is what the updated view is going to look like with the policy or with the guaranteed maximum price. I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with the scope of the project. Starting second week in May, demolition in the locker rooms, moving throughout the summer to be by August. So essentially what we're voting on here is to amend the guaranteed maximum price by $148,000. Now make the new maximum price, which is roughly about $1.2 million, for the renovation of the downstairs bathrooms.
And the renovation itself, it's obviously it's original to the school. Is that what it is? Is for this building, and it's, all the bathroom stalls and all the sinks.
Yes.
And all the tiles inside.
Yes.
And you guys, any questions on this? We're already doing the gym itself already.
But just to clarify, this increase is being asked to be paid by the town.
The town is covering this.
Correct.
And so we have money in the what's the capital fund for this. It's basically if we're doing the work up top, we might as well just complete this last thing. Are there any questions? Any issues?
No.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much, Oliver. All right, regular meeting's over with. We're going to move to close executive session. Thanks for all attending here.